So tonight, I'm looking at a book by Krishnamurti called Can the Mind Be Quiet? Really interesting, really good book. And I'm going to start with this English proverb. And this is what it says. It says, the best way to see divine light is to put out your own candle. So isn't that interesting? I mean, that's what we've been talking about. Well, what do you hear in that? What does that say to you? I'll read it again. Paul said, read it again. The best way to see divine light is to put out your own candle.
Any reactions?
Absolutely. They putting you, my candle is the I, is the me. That's where all the emotional and psychological problems lie. It's the creation of this ego that forms the censor. I love that word, censor, to me, you know, that prevents you from seeing things as they are.
Correct.
You know, and nobody does it better than Krishnamurti. I'm sorry. I mean, Gene Klein is wonderful, and I did get his book that you got last, and it's lovely. It's lovely writing,
right.
Lovely writing.
Yes.
But Krishnamurti tells it like it is. Excuse me.
Well, I'm going to share with you this little chapter from the book, and what's interesting is the first paragraph. He's describing his awareness of nature. And it's really quite a beautiful paragraph in how he takes in with awareness all of nature. And then a questioner comes and asks him a question. But this is how this very short little chapter begins. This is Krishnamurti talking. The mountains were full of solitude. It had been raining off and on for 3 days, and the mountains were green with light. They had become almost blue, and in their fullness, they were making the heavens rich and beautiful. There was great silence. Unlike the sea, when you walked on the beach in the wet sand, the breakers made a great deal of noise. There was no silence there except in your heart. But among the mountains, on that winding path, silence was everywhere. The noise of the town, the roar of the traffic, and the thunder of the waves could not be heard. It was a beautiful afternoon, and with the setting sun, a few of the hilltops seemed to be alive with a light of their own. The questioner. One is always puzzled about action, and it gets more and more bewildering when one sees the complexity of life. There are so many things that should be done, and there are other things that need immediate action. The world around us is changing so rapidly. Its values, its morality, its wars and peace, that one is utterly lost before the immediacy of action. Yet one is always asking oneself what one should do, confronted with the enormous problem of living. One has lost one's faith in most things, in the leaders, in the teachers, in beliefs, and one often wishes for some kind of principle that operates in spite of oneself, something that would light your path, or some authority that would tell you what to do. but we also know in our heart that all these things are something dead and gone. Yet invariably we come back asking ourselves what it is all about and what we are to do in this. Krishnamurti answers, as one observes, we have always acted from a center which contracts and expands. Sometimes it is a very small circle, and at other times it is comprehensive, inclusive, and utterly satisfying. But it is always a center of grief and sorrow, of fleeting joys and misery, the enchanting or the painful past. It is a center which most of us know consciously or unconsciously. From the center we act, and we have our roots in it. The question of what to do now or tomorrow is always asked from this center, and the reply must always be recognizable by the center. Having received a reply, either from another or from ourselves, we proceed to act according to the limitation of the center. It is like an animal tethered to a post, its action depending on the length of the rope. This action is never free, and so there is always pain, mischief, and confusion. Realizing this, the center says to itself, how am I to be free, to live happily, completely, openly, and act without sorrow or remorse? But it is still the center that is asking the question. This center is the past. This center is the me with its self-centered activities, which only knows action in terms of reward and punishment, of achievement and failure, with motives, causes, and effects. It is caught in this chain. This chain is the center and the prison. There is the other action that comes when there is space in which there is no center, a dimension in which there is no cause and effect. From this, living is action. Having no center, whatever is done is free, joyous, without the pain of pleasure. This space and freedom is not a result of effort and achievement. When the center ends, the other is. But how can the center end? What am I to do to end it? What disciplines? What sacrifices? What great efforts have I to make? Krishnamurti, none. Only see without any choice the activities of the center, not as an observer, not as an outsider looking within, but just observe without the center. I can't do it. I am always looking with the eyes of the past. Krishnamurti. Then be aware that you're looking with the eyes of the past and be with it. Remain with it. Don't try to do anything about it. Be simple and know that whatever you try to do is the response of your own desire to escape from it and will only strengthen the center. So there is no escape, no effort, and no despair. Then you can see the full meaning of the center and the immense danger of it. So what did you hear? What does this say to you? What comments, what questions?
Since you made mention of Hemingway, I was a great fan of his. And he's credited with saying something to Lena Horne. He was giving her career advice. And he said, don't confuse motion for action. So when I hear Krishnamurti using a word like action, I know it is not, whatever it brings up in my mind is not consistent with his concept of action. And he tells us almost immediately what he considers to be action, and that is to look and see. He doesn't say change anything. And to me, that's monumental.
Yes. Yes. He's saying, in other words, the seeing is the doing, right? When you see clearly the workings of this center, this me, without any choice, the seeing is the doing, then there is action.
Yeah, because it's seeing without the eye. It's seeing, it's not seeing it through the sensor. I mean, that's the thing that I work at. That's hard because, in a sense, any action that I take, it comes from the me. It's an action of the me. And what he's trying to say is there's a different dimension. There's a different way of seeing, or a different way of being, in a sense. And that's just being, without thinking about it, without using anything involved, just being. And once in a while I get a glimpse of that. And it, like Billy says, it is really powerful, because I'm afraid of it, to tell you the truth. There are times it scares me. I'm so riveted to the eye, I'm so riveted to my center, that, my God, to let go of it, I'm going to fall off the world. And so in a sense, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. So don't do anything, and try, like, to be choicelessly aware.
Mm.
The question that comes to mind in listening to what Hugo just said is, what's wrong with falling off the world?
From the eye point of view, it's terrible, because I'm seeing it from the eye. It's the eye talking. The thing is that without the eye, there is no such thing as falling. There is no such thing as world. It just is being. So that all of those concepts, world, falling off, that's part of the eye structure. That's part of the conditioning that this eye sees the world through. That this me experiences, the actions of today, what's going on. I don't know if I can explain it that well, but
Oh, you've explained it very well.
I don't know.
And I think what Krishnamurti is saying is that seeing that is the appropriate action.
Hmm. Well, it's interesting because Ugo said that at times there is an awareness of being not from this me. But in that moment, there's fear arises because there's a fear of letting go of this stronghold of our security or sense of safety, which the me, in a way, has provided us with, although it's obviously not safe at all because it's the fundamental cause of our suffering. But yet, it's what I know and it's familiar, so we think it's safe. So the question then becomes, I think, must we not then look at fear? The fear of letting go of this me. What is it that comes up in those moments when there's a glimpse of just being with no me? Just this openness, this spaciousness. And then does fear arise so that one is brought back to the center? So then we need to look at fear, don't we? And we need to look at fear in the same way that he's asking us to look at the workings of the me, because fear is me. Me is fear. So is there a choiceless awareness of whatever it is that appears in this consciousness, especially fear?
For me, the best way I can describe the fear, it's a threat. Somehow I feel threatened that there's going to be harm, something's going to happen, I'm going to lose something, but I feel a threat. And it's that sense of insecurity, whether it be criticism, whether it be pain, physical pain, somehow, and I can't identify it. It's just like a feeling of anxiety. But the anxiety I realize is fear. When I get to digging it, I can define it a little bit better as fear. I mean, I have learned a great deal about it from reading from Krishnamurti. And, the interesting thing that I find about it is that if you dig down deep enough, the fear becomes fear when you name it.
Ah, yes, the word.
And that's helped me a great deal because I've actually experimented with that and feeling and not trying desperately not to name it. And if I can stay with that, it goes away. That feeling goes away. But these are little clips that I have, little chips here, little chips there. But for me, those little chips validate, and I put my trust in Krishnamurti. That's about the best way that I can describe it. And to a large extent, Gene Klein talks along these lines.
Yes.
And a great many others, I guess. But
Ugo, you said you're damned if you do and you damned if you don't. I thought that was really interesting too. And I like what Bill was referring to. If you fall off the earth, the face of the earth. So damned if you do and damned if you don't. So who's damned if you do and who's damned if you don't?
The idea of me.
I know, but there's two parts there. You're damned if you do. So if you do let go, that's one part. If you don't let go, it's another part. So in other words, from the perspective of the ego, right? In other words, one part of that is the ego, and another part of that is your self with a capital S, right?
I
So,
can't see it that way. I'm
I know,
sorry,
but just
Walter,
listen.
but I can't see
I
the
know.
capital S.
I know. Just hold on for 1 second. So when you're saying if you don't let go, right? In other words, if you stay within this egoic self, right? You have enough experience. We all have enough experience at this point to recognize we're damned at that point, right? In other words, the ego is our basically our damned self, right? It's the part that we are miserable, we suffer, we're not alive, we're bound by fear, et cetera, right? So that's the damned if you don't let go. And if you do let go, what's happening is at that point, the ego becomes damned, because what happens is you're shattering the boundary of this egoic self. And I know maybe this is sounding a little extraneous or something, but the thing about it is you don't have to do it. You don't have to let go of the earth where you fall off the face of the earth. You can do it in little steps. In other words, you can expand that sense of self, that sense of egoic self, in little steps. So in other words, rather than just falling off the face of the earth, you can sort of go along, you can go along the curvature of the earth for a while. You can take little steps that are expanding this notion of who you are. And then by expanding that notion of who you are, eventually you'll end up with a limitless self. I'm sorry. I'm not really pulling it in here together. But the damned if you do and you damned if you don't is there's two parts of you in that. And I think that's important to recognize. It's not just one self that you're talking about.
No, I'm sorry, but that is the self. That is the ego that's doing both of those things. It's seeing it. It's one ego. There isn't two egos or 100 egos or 1,000 egos. To me, the ego is from the content of my consciousness. All the memory, everything that's happened to me, it's stored up in memory. This is the basis of what I think is the ego. And when it comes to psychological aspects of my life, that's where a great deal of the suffering comes from. So I realize what you're saying and taking it in steps, and that's the reasonable thing to do. But that's my ego telling me to do that. But Krishnamurti tells me to do it. Either you do it or you don't. You don't take things in steps. You're either violent or you're not violent. You're either hungry or you're not hungry. You're either fearing or you're not fearing. Because to take it in little steps, you're still enabling the ego to do that. And what he's trying to get me to do is to see that I've got to figure out a way of letting go of that and not letting the ego be part of the play, because that's what's been going on most of my life. Most of my life. That ego has been running the show emotionally.
Yes.
And the more I see into that, the more I can let go, but without the effort. And I don't know how to explain it. You got to read Krishnamurti. Read him. He'll tell you how to do it.
Okay, I think I can clarify it a little bit. I agree. Whether you're, what did you say? You're damned if you do or you're damned if you don't. That's ego. Damned if you do or damned you don't. And it's not, there's no you letting go. You letting go is the me saying, I'm going to let go, or I'm not going to let go. Letting go happens when there is a clear, choiceless seeing. In that moment, in a clear, choiceless seeing, there is a letting go. That doesn't mean that a second later it can't come back again. But in that moment, there's a somewhat of a space, a glimpse of freedom and a letting go. The person can't let go of the person. Just as Jean Klein said last week, the mind can never change the mind. So it's all the me. I should let go, I shouldn't let go, I'm gonna let go, I'm not gonna, that's all the me. And as Krishnamurti was telling this person, so then just stay with that. Just let that be a seeing of what's happening in that moment, a full present awareness of what's happening in that moment with no editorializing, censoring, commenting. Yeah.
So is there an ego if there is no movement of thought?
No. No. Ego is me is thought.
Right. So when one sits quietly and there is no thought moving, then you're without a center.
Yes.
Now,
I
I think
oh,
that's enough of a practice for small little steps, just to see how completely without thought you can sit for brief periods of time.
or the witnessing of the movements of thought, the witnessing of the movements of thought. But
Yes,
it's not the person
That's
who's
true.
witnessing. That's where the ultimate self,
yeah.
that is the self with a capital S. Let me, I just want to read to you just a few paragraphs of what Krishnamurti is saying here. He's speaking to a person, and this is what he's saying here. If you see very clearly what is the need of choice, choice exists only when the mind is confused. The fact is that being uncertain, confused, and therefore not able to see clearly, out of this, choice is made. You choose your leader according to your prejudice, your confusion, political or otherwise. You choose according to your temperament, to your peculiar idiosyncrasies and taste. Your taste, your idiosyncrasy, and tendency is the cause of confusion. You have your confusion and the other has his. He chooses his leader and you choose whom you shall follow. And so there is a division between your truth and his truth, between your leader and his leader. And where there is division, there is conflict. Conflict's very nature and structure is confusion. We say, well, that's my characteristic, my character, and give great importance to character, to your quality, your peculiar behavior, your peculiar twist of thought and feeling. This you call your individuality. That individuality is broken up into fragments. These many fragments, conscious or unconscious, are what you call the characteristics of an individual. But the very word individual means indivisible. I'll read that again. But the very word individual means indivisible, not fragmented, and therefore not confused. When an individual is broken up as he is, and therefore he is not an individual, these many fragments are in opposition to each other, and in their contradiction bring about confusion. Out of this confusion, you choose. So your leader, your beliefs and prejudice must also be confused. You choose out of confusion. What is important is not choice, but the clearing up of confusion, or rather the ending of confusion, so that there is clear perception. So perception is what matters and not choice. When there is clear perception, there is no need for choice at all. Choice demands resistance, assertion of will, and a subtle process of isolation, which puts an end to all relationship and to love. So exploration is not in the field of choice, but into the field of seeing, hearing, and learning, which are really one. It is to see without any distortion, without any fragmentation, to see wholly, with sanity, with what that word whole implies, which is holy. It is to see the truth of this, not according to your truth or to your peculiarities or my peculiarities, but to see without any distortion. This puts an end to all choice and therefore to all effort. A Protestant, a communist, or a Hindu, and so on, is not able to see things as they are wholly because he is conditioned. It is this conditioning that is called character, which is a form of resistance cultivated in a particular culture or social structure. So to live without any choice is true freedom. It is not within the borders of a particular culture and doesn't create its own borders. It moves without building the banks which hold the movement. After all, love is that. In love, there is no choice or effort or contradiction. When love is translated as pleasure, desire, and the pursuit of an enjoyable memory, then that brings about the narrow banks within which the small stream flows, with the noise of despair and agony. So what did you hear?
Well, to live without any choice, that's true freedom. That's profound, because we're taught all our lives that, at least by the advertisers and marketers, that we need to have choice. We have to always be creating choice to live, to make ourselves happier, to look better, more young, that sort of thing.
Right. So, and he says there is no choice when there is clear seeing.
Right. I mean,
right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So clear seeing, or a matter of perception, when before you have a chance to overlay a concept over what you're perceiving, that is true freedom.
Yes.
Which is hard to maintain, of course, but the seeing is the doing.
Right.
If we see we start to stray from this state of perception, that brings us back to perception or awareness.
That's right. Yes. Yes.
It's more or less seeing without having the seeing go through the center, the me, the I, to be interpreted. In other words, it's just seeing. There isn't what the observer and the observed. I mean, really, I mean, I can really see that where I look at something and I really don't see it until I translate it. Oh, that's a nice ice cream or whatever it is. It's there, it's beautiful, but it seems like it only really becomes real once I verbalize it in my mind. And that's the process that creates and supports this center, this me, this ego. And that's the thing that, is hard to deal with, because it implies one has to understand that as much as I got into this thing to end sorrow, the other half of it is you got to also end the search for pleasure, because sorrow and pleasure are it's the same coin, but it's one's on one side, one's on the other side, and that can be difficult sometimes to accept it. I mean, I like certain things. Well, you got to get over it, Paula.
It's not so much the liking, it's being attached to the liking,
Mm,
right? I mean,
mm,
it's the attachment to
Yeah, you
the.
become dependent
Yes.
on it, right?
right, dependent
Yeah.
is the key here. That there's a creation of dependency.
Yeah.
So we begin to depend, whether it's on another person or, as he says, on our beliefs.
Yeah.
We begin to depend on this, on these things. And with that dependency comes attachment, right? We become attached to that which we depend on. And when we become attached to that which we depend on, fear is created, because there's a fear of losing
Yeah.
that person or that thing that I'm depending on and have attached to. So it's so interesting, because all this is the working of the me. And so he says, it's all about seeing, hearing, and learning. Seeing, hearing, and learning. So, Ugo, when you said before, there's a realization of an anxiety. Well, if there is a real listening to the body, because the anxiety, it's felt in the body. Before you even name it anxiety, there's yes, it somaticizes. There's a pain, there's a discomfort in the body. We look at that, or the me looks at that and labels it anxiety or fear. And then we move from there. And now we're into this me who's now building up a lot of different scenarios around this fear. And it's strengthening itself. And it's interesting, because as we said last week, the me always needs a situation to latch on to, because the situation expands it, has it grow. And so it's always looking to attach to a situation. I mean, that's what we do. It's not it, it's us. That's what we do. We look for situations to attach onto that then will bring us either fear or joy or pleasure, I should say, something or some kind of drama or some kind of story that we can attach to. And suddenly, even though we suffer, there's a feeling of safety. Because now the me is back in control and has taken center stage again. So what he's suggesting in these readings tonight is just to be able choicelessly to see this, to have a choiceless awareness. And that doesn't require any action but seeing or listening, and thereby learning in the moment. Because in the next moment, that's gone, and there's a new me that has arisen with a new situation. That's why he says, in a way, be very simple. Be very simple by being choicelessly aware. And when there's awareness of not being choicelessly aware, then just look at that. See that. And at that moment, we have to be very, very careful that there's no condemnation, no guilt, no beating oneself up. When there is a seeing without choiceless awareness, when there's an opinion or a conclusion or a judgment, that too needs to have a choiceless, to be choicelessly aware of. Because getting back to how we opened with this proverb, the best way to see divine light is to put out your own candle. So it seems that the practice or the work or whatever you want to call it is about seeing, listening, and learning so that that candle goes out. But you can't make it happen. It will happen, even if it's just for glimpses. But the person can't make it happen. It just happens when there's a choiceless seeing. Moment by moment.
When there's no movement of thought and a choiceless seeing of when thought resumes.
Mm. Mhm.
Evelyn, when you say the person can't make it happen, it's what I think what you're saying is the ego can't make it happen.
Correct. That's what I mean.
So I
Correct.
think this is the confusion that we're all sort of dealing with. There's only one self, right? With a capital S,
The ultimate subject.
the ultimate subject. And there's an illusion or a delusion that somehow we're separated. That's the egoic self.
That's right.
Right? But that egoic self in and of itself only exists because of the self with a capital S, right? So it's an illusion.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like the charioteer that drives the 5 horses, right? In the Bhagavad Gita. There's only one charioteer that you want, which is the self with a capital S. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So and I guess that's the thing. So if we're feeling fear, we're in the ego. If we're feeling separated, we're in the ego. If we're feeling damned, we're in the ego.
Right.
But we also have come far enough along in our readings and our education with all this, where we understand that the ego is not where it's an illusion that we don't want to sustain.
Right.
So what we're looking to do is we're looking to surrender that illusion. And in the surrendering of that illusion, we're acting on faith that there's something else that's there.
Mm.
And that something else that's there is it's when we, what you're talking about with that quote, when you put out our own light, then we see the divine light. So we put out that egoic light with the faith that somehow behind it there is the divine light is going to be there. When we relinquish the egoic self, when we surrender this egoic self, there is nothing else, right? There, when that illusion is gone,
Mm.
there is only the self.
Correct.
Right? That's the reality that we're all kind of talking about. There is only the self. So
Right.
somehow we're challenged with how can we get past this illusion
Mm-hmm.
of this egoic separate self. That's the only thing that we're talking about here.
That's right. That's right.
And
That's right.
but that illusion of the separate self, I'm sorry to keep harping on this, is maintained by the movement of thought.
Yes, of course. Yes,
I think
of
that's kind
course.
of important to keep repeating. If
Right.
we're looking for, the language is dualistic, but if we're looking for basic mechanisms or basic pointers or basic ways to unlock this prison, we've got to recognize that the movement of thought is a crucial linchpin here. Without any movement of thought, I'm free.
Yes, I totally agree with you. However, with that being said, the self can also express movements of thought, right? In other words, we can, that choiceless awareness you're talking about
Mhm.
is an experience with the self through the movement of thought in the realm of creation, right? So we're still experience the self with a capital S at that point, even though there is movement of thought in that time. However, I totally agree with you. That lack of thought or that lack of movement of thought is an opportunity for us to become aware of this self with a capital S, because there is nothing else at that moment. There is no other thing. And the ego doesn't exist without, as you said earlier, doesn't exist without thought. But the self with a capital S does exist without thought.
Of course.
Can I say something?
Sure.
Yeah, I met all of you very recently, but over time I've come, I'm sure everybody heard what I'm going to say. I just can't remember everything of 40 years, but this came up while Walter was talking. That the only thought that the real self has is its first thought, which is the I am. So that's the first thought of the real self is I am, and the absolute is even behind that. But and then we were talking when Ugo was saying he had glimpses of awareness. One method for meditation is to stop thinking and to just be in tune with your sense of existence, that I am thought. And it depends how deep you can go with that. But from I am comes all other thoughts that are ego created. I just wanted to say that.
Okay.
I think when you use the word dependence, we use that word in a lot of situations, to the point that it almost seems like, well, I depend upon this, but I won't do it anymore, so cool. And maybe that's possible at times. But what I hear is addiction.
Mm.
If I become addicted to behaviors and attitudes and opinions and judgments, that means that if I let them go, I don't exist anymore. I stop existing. My identity is zero. And I think that's an illusion, but it's the reason. It's the reason when if someone suggests, well, you know, you should stop doing this, whatever it is, and you'll be happier. And you, that very idea of it frightens the hell out of you. It's because there is something as powerful as an addiction that is operating.
That's right.
And it's like, I've got brown eyes, so it's like you telling me, wake up tomorrow morning with blue eyes.
Yeah. But we have to look at this, at addiction and clinging dependency, and see that obviously that's the workings of the me. That's masking deeper feelings of inadequacy, of fear. And so there's a great comfort in that which we begin to depend on. And we're all addicted in one way or another on something or other, whether it's our beliefs, whether it's drugs, whether it's alcohol, whether it's another person. We're all, to varying degrees, addicted. And it's important to see that in the moment. And nobody can tell you to let it go. There has to be a seeing of the workings of this dependency, of this addiction, and the consequences of it, for it to be surrendered to. And yes, we've identified with our addictions. And there is a fear of letting go of whatever it is we're addicted to, for fear that we will lose our identity. But that, as Chip was saying, is an illusion. It's an illusion in that it's depending on something else that's real. It's something that's not real, an illusion, that's really depending on something that's very real, the absolute subjective self. And I think probably all addictions, all dependencies, is a yearning for that self-realization. I mean, that's what we're talking about when we talk about knowing the self, which you can't know because that's what you are. But there can be a realization of what you are. That's fundamentally what we're all yearning for. We're yearning for that peace. We're yearning for the end of suffering. We're yearning for the end of violence in ourselves and outside ourselves. We're yearning for beauty. And yet, most of our lives are far from beautiful. So we're all yearning for that. And yet we're all addicted to something that we're dependent on. However, I think the good news is that the spotlight of awareness, I don't know, I'm calling it the spotlight of awareness, shines on the illusion of this me, which is the past, which is our memories, which is the images that we carry about ourselves of inadequate, not good enough, not lovable enough, not smart enough, not safe enough. To begin to see and listen and learn, just as Krishnamurti was saying, in the moment about how that's working. With nobody telling us, do this or do that, or you must give up this or you must give up that. No. Yeah, there is I don't know if the word is earnestness or there's just a call to see. And it's open, it's free. There's no forcing in this. And it truly is a beautiful thing. When there's no expectation of any result at all, only the beauty of a choiceless seeing in the moment.
Evelyn, there's also this idea that what's keeping us from this choiceless awareness? It's this egoic mind, right? We talked
Yeah.
about. And you guys have probably read Milton Erickson. You know Milton Erickson,
Yeah.
the therapist?
I've seen providers.
Yeah.
So if any of you have always longed for that opportunity.
I don't know where that sound's coming from. Who is
No,
that?
I don't know. But go ahead.
So that one did go through.
Oh, wait a minute. Somebody is talking there. All right, Chip, go ahead.
So, Ugo, the thing I was talking about with taking it by steps, I'd just like to talk about that for one brief moment. So Milton Erickson was this hypnotherapist who was really kind of brilliant and very, I thought he was, I loved some of his case studies that I read. And one of his case studies was he had this old guy who had a fear of elevators. And so he made an appointment for this guy to show up at this building with a tall elevator and be at elevator number 7 at 9 o'clock on Friday morning. And I want you to get into the elevator and push the 9th floor and go up to the 9th floor. So this guy had a fear of elevators. So Milton Erickson knows this. So he paid this young woman to go in at 9 o'clock, elevator number 7. She was wearing a short skirt and she was flirting with this guy. So this guy, he was an old conservative gentleman, and he said, look, never you mind. He said, just push that button and let's get going. So the brilliance of this thing was, in fact, the guy was able to go up in the elevator because his mind was diverted from his attention on his fear for the elevator through this discomfort he was feeling with this young woman flirting with him, right? So the reason I'm saying this is because one of the ways that we can work with our minds, and one of the things we're learning through this choiceless awareness, is we're learning how to divert our attention into a different direction. And that different direction is allowing us to have that egoic grip, that egoic addiction loosened, because our mind, our attention is being diverted into something else. With choiceless awareness, you're paying attention. You're I don't know what the right word is. You're following this lead that's being given to you. So that's kind of what I was talking about. And through those little expansions, so that guy going up one floor after the next, or, you know, with whatever we choose to do, these little expansions of our experience, we eventually leave the egoic self that we were yesterday, and we arrive at an expanded sense of self. And we keep doing that till we basically drop that sense of egoic self completely. So that's what I was trying to say.
And attention is the right word, is a good word.
Yeah.
To attention, you're just fully attending.
Well, yeah, the opposite of that is what keeps us from it, Chip, is inadvertence,
Yeah. Inattention.
inattention. right.
Inattention. But yes, attention is a wonderful word. Attending to.
When
Yeah.
you're in attention, when you're being really attentive, there is no chatter up here.
That's right.
There is nothing going on. There is only, you're in the moment. You're
Correct.
in that absolute moment. And we've all done it, whether it's been at an
Sure.
opera or
Sure.
at a museum or whatever. I think the thing is that what what Walter was saying, that to bring attention to the fact that this does happen, that this can happen, and it reinforces, for me,
Yes.
it reinforces the whole notion of the ego and what it is and what it can do. And with all the pointers that we read and so on and so forth, then if you're persuaded, if you're sensitive to some points, you pursue them, so that I have the experience of doing it, not the reading, not the learning, but I have the experience of doing it. In other words, it's self-knowledge. They call about self-knowledge. And that's the only way this thing works. I mean, nobody can tell you how to do it.
That's
Nobody can point you how to do it or anything like that.
That's
You
right.
have to do it yourself, and something happens.
Yes.
And I ain't gonna tell you what it is.
Well,
Yeah.
we've got to stop.
Okay.
I hope you all have a wonderful week. and,
Yes.
We'll look forward to seeing you all next week.
Thank you so much for coming.
Spring is on the way.
Thank you.
Buona notte
Bye.
tutti. Buona notte.
Thanks, everyone.